I'm Marisol Vega, 22 years old. Until 3 months ago, I believed that working hard and staying out of trouble meant something in my family. Then coming home after college graduation changed everything. I stood in my childhood doorway, watching my 15-year-old brother Leo sprawled across my old bed, my posters replaced with his gaming setup. My mother's words still echo in my mind. "You're grown now, mija. You understand, right?" What she didn't know was that I had been sending half my work-study money home for 2 years, helping with groceries and Leo's tutoring. They offered me the garage, a dusty, unfinished space with concrete floors and a broken fan. 4 years of college, and this was my homecoming. But here's what makes this story unbelievable. What I discovered hidden in that garage would change everything I thought I knew about my family. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The Texas heat hit me like a wall when I stepped off the Greyhound bus at the San Antonio station. May in South Texas isn't forgiving, and my graduation dress, a simple navy blue thing I'd bought at a thrift store near campus, was already sticking to my back. I'd worn it for the ceremony 3 days earlier, walking across that stage with my environmental policy degree, thinking about how proud my family would be, how wrong I was. The familiar smell of diesel fuel and street vendor barbacoa filled my nostrils as I dragged my 2 suitcases toward the pickup area. 4 years at the University of Texas had changed me in ways I was still discovering, but coming home always brought back that old version of myself, the careful daughter who measured her words, who never asked for too much. Dad's beat-up Ford. Pickup pulled up right on time. Carlos Vega was nothing if not punctual. He stepped out, his construction-weathered hands already reaching for my bags before we exchanged more than a nod. That was Dad. Show love through action, never through words. "Mija," he said. And that single word carried more warmth than most people's entire conversations. He pulled me into a brief, work shirt-scented hug that smelled like sawdust and old spice. "You look good. College fed you well." I laughed, settling into the familiar torn passenger seat. Ramen noodles and stress, mostly. The drive through our neighborhood always felt like traveling backward in time. The same chain-link fences, the same corner store with the faded Coca-Cola sign, the same houses with their tiny front yards struggling against the heat. Our street, Mesquite Avenue, looked exactly as I'd left it. A row of modest single-story homes where everyone knew everyone's business, where Mrs. Bartlow still tended her impossible garden despite the scorching sun. "Your mother's excited," Dad said, navigating around a pothole that had been there since I was in middle school. "She's been cooking since yesterday." My stomach rumbled at the thought. Mom's cooking was legendary in our house. Her enchiladas verdes could solve most of life's problems, and her tres leches cake had been the highlight of every birthday since I could remember. The idea of real, home-cooked food after 4 years, of cafeteria meals and whatever I could afford made my mouth water. "How's Leo doing?" I asked, genuinely curious. My little brother had struggled through most of high school, and his ADHD diagnosis last year had explained a lot of the chaos that seemed to follow him everywhere. "Better," Dad said, his voice careful. "The medication helps. He's been more focused." Something in his tone made me look at him sideways. But before I could ask more questions, we were pulling into our driveway. The house looked smaller than I remembered. Its pale yellow paint faded but familiar. Mom's wind chimes hung motionless in the still air, and I could see her shadow moving behind the kitchen window. The front door flew open before I could even get out of the truck. Rosa Vega appeared in a flour-dusted apron, her dark hair pulled, back in the same ponytail she'd worn my entire life. She was a small woman, barely 5 feet tall, but she'd always seemed larger than life to me. Today, though, there was something different in her expression, a tension around her eyes that I couldn't quite place. "Mi amor." She wrapped me in arms that smelled like vanilla and chili powder. "Look at you, so thin. We need to fix that immediately." I melted into her embrace, feeling for a moment like the little girl who used to help her fold laundry and sort through her nursing scrubs. This was home. This was where I belonged. Come, she said, pulling me toward the house. Leo's in his room, but dinner's almost ready. I made your favorites. The living room hit me with a wave of nostalgia. The same overstuffed couch with the crocheted doilies my grandmother had made. The same family photos crowding the mantelpiece. The same religious candles flickering on the corner table. Everything was exactly as I'd left it, frozen in time. I'll just put my bags in my room and freshen up, I said, heading toward the hallway. Mom's hand on my arm stopped me. Actually, mija, we need to talk about that. The tone in her voice made my stomach clench. This was her nurse voice, the one she used when delivering difficult news to patients' families. Leo's been having a hard time, she began, not quite meeting my eyes. The doctors say routine is really important for kids with ADHD. Stability, you know. And his room was so small, and with all his gaming equipment and school supplies. I felt the ground shifting beneath my feet, though I couldn't yet name what was happening. So we moved him into your room. It's bigger, better for him. You understand, right? The words hit me like cold water. My room? You're grown now, mija. You're 22. You don't need the same things a teenager needs. I walked down the hallway, in a daze, my feet carrying me automatically to the door that had been mine for 18 years. I pushed it open and found my childhood completely erased. Leo's gaming setup dominated the space where my bookshelf used to be. His clothes spilled from the closet that once held my debate team medals and homecoming dresses. My old desk, where I'd written scholarship applications and dreamed about college, now supported 3 monitors and a tangle of gaming cords. The walls that had been covered with my debate team photos and college acceptance letters now displayed his gaming posters and a San Antonio Spurs pennant. He looked up from his computer, gaming headset around his neck, and had the grace to look slightly embarrassed. Hey, Mari. Welcome home. Leo had grown in the 4 years I'd been away. He was taller now, his voice deeper, but his eyes still held that same mischievous spark that had gotten him in and out of trouble our entire childhood. He wasn't a bad kid, just the baby of the family who had never learned that the world didn't revolve around him. This is different, I managed, my voice sounding strange even to myself. Mom said you'd be cool with it, he said quickly. Since you're probably moving out soon anyway, right? For a job or whatever? I nodded numbly, unable to trust my voice. Of course. I was supposed to be cool with it. I was the good daughter, the one who understood, the one who never made waves. Where am I sleeping? I asked when I found my voice, again. Mom appeared behind me, wringing her hands. We set up a space for you in the garage. It's actually quite nice. We cleared it out, put in a cot, got you a little fan. Very private. You'll see. The garage. They wanted me to sleep in the garage. I followed her through the kitchen, past the dining room where the table was set with our good plates, past the sliding door that led to our tiny backyard, to the side door that opened into the garage. The space was exactly what I'd expected, and somehow worse. The concrete floor was swept clean, and they'd hung a sheet across one corner to create a makeshift bedroom. A narrow camping cot sat against the wall, topped with sheets that smelled like they'd been stored in a closet for years. A small oscillating fan, the kind you'd use for a dorm room, sat on an overturned crate. There was no window, just the overhead fluorescent light that hummed constantly and cast everything in harsh, unflattering brightness. See? Mom said with forced cheerfulness. Your own private space. And look, we put up this little mirror for you. It was a plastic mirror, the kind you'd find at a dollar store, taped to the wall above a card table that apparently served as a dresser. I know it's different, she continued, but it's just temporary. Until you figure out your next steps. Temporary. The word hung in the air like smoke. I set my suitcases down on the concrete floor and tried to summon a smile. "It's fine, Mom. Thank you for making space." But it wasn't fine. Standing in that garage, surrounded by Dad's tools and Christmas decorations and boxes of things we never used, I felt something shift inside me. This wasn't about sleeping arrangements. This was about being seen, about mattering, about having a place in the family hierarchy. For 4 years, I'd been living independently, working 2 jobs while maintaining a 3.7 GPA, sending money home when I could barely afford groceries. I'd imagined coming home to celebration, to recognition, to my childhood room preserved like a shrine to the first Vega to graduate college. Instead, I got a cot in the garage and the expectation that I'd be grateful for it. That night, lying on the thin mattress listening to the hum of the fluorescent light, I stared at the ceiling and tried to make sense of what had happened. Through the thin walls, I could hear the family watching television in the living room, their laughter filtering through the drywall like an echo of belonging I was no longer part of. I'd come home expecting to find my place in the family. Instead, I'd discovered I didn't have one anymore. The second morning in the garage, I woke up to the sound of Dad's truck starting at 5:30 a.m. The thin walls did nothing to muffle the diesel engine, and the vibration traveled through the concrete, floor straight into my cot. I lay there for a moment, disoriented by the unfamiliar surroundings, before the reality of my situation crashed back over me. I was 22 years old, a college graduate, sleeping in my parents' garage. The fluorescent light buzzed overhead. I'd left it on all night because the darkness felt too thick, too absolute. My phone showed 3 missed calls from my best friend Amara, who had stayed in Austin for a summer internship. She'd been texting me constantly since I'd gotten home, wanting to hear all about my triumphant return. I wasn't ready to tell her the truth yet. The house was quiet when I slipped inside to use the bathroom. Mom had already left for her shift at the hospital. She worked nights in the ER, which meant she slept most of the day. Leo's door was closed, and I could hear the faint sound of his alarm going off repeatedly. Some things never changed. In the IE kitchen, I found a note on the counter. "Mija, there's coffee made and eggs in the fridge. Help yourself to anything. We'll talk more tonight. Love, Mom." The mundane kindness of it, the careful consideration, the assumption that everything was normal, made my chest tight. This was the thing about my family that made everything so complicated. They weren't cruel people. They loved me in their way, but somehow, their love had become conditional on my compliance, my understanding, my willingness to take up less space. I was scrambling eggs when Leo shuffled into the kitchen, his hair sticking up at impossible angles. He mumbled something. That might have been good morning, and headed straight for the cereal cabinet. "Sleep okay?" I asked, testing the waters. He shrugged, pouring frosted flakes into a bowl. "Yeah, that bed's really comfortable. Way better than my old one." My old bed, I thought. But I kept my voice light. "That's good. Important for growing boys to get good sleep." He looked at me then. Really looked. And for a moment, I saw something like guilt flicker across his face. "Mari, I didn't ask for them. To move me, you know. It just kind of happened." "I know," I said, and I meant it. This wasn't Leo's fault. He was 15, the baby, the one who'd struggled. Of course the family had rallied around him. "You don't have to feel bad about it." "But you're mad," he said, not quite making it a question. I considered lying, giving him the easy answer that would keep the peace. But something about the way he was looking at me, like he genuinely wanted to understand, made me tell the truth. "I'm not mad at you," I said carefully. "But I am hurt. It's hard to feel like you don't have a place in your own family." He absorbed this quietly, chewing his cereal with unusual thoughtfulness. "Maybe we could share," he offered eventually. Like, you could have the room during the day and I could sleep there at night. The sweetness of the offer made my throat tight. That's really nice, Leo, but I don't think Mom and Dad would go for that. We finished breakfast in comfortable silence, and I felt something shift between us. He was growing up, becoming more aware of how his actions affected others. Maybe there was hope for this family yet. That afternoon, while Leo was at summer school, I decided to properly unpack my things in the garage. I'd been living out of my suitcases for 2 days, but it was time to accept that this was my reality, at least for now. I'd just finished hanging my few dresses on a makeshift clothes rod Dad had rigged up when I heard a voice from the doorway. Well, that's a sight I never expected to see. I turned to find Mrs. Ellen Bartlow standing in the garage entrance, holding a glass pitcher of what looked like lemonade. Our next-door neighbor was in her 70s, a retired elementary school teacher who still moved with the brisk efficiency of someone used to managing classroom chaos. She had short silver hair that she kept perfectly styled and bright blue eyes that missed nothing. "Mrs. Bartlow," I said, suddenly self-conscious about my makeshift living situation. "Hi." "Don't you?" "Mrs. Bartlow, me, child. I've known you since you were knee-high to a grasshopper. It's Ellen." She stepped into the garage, taking in the cot, the sheet partition, the general impossibility of the situation. "And what in the Sam Hill is this?" There was something about her direct gaze that made lying impossible. "I'm staying here for the summer, while I figure out my next steps." "In the garage?" "Yes, ma'am." "Your parents put their college-educated daughter in the garage?" When she said it like that, it sounded even worse. "It's temporary." Ellen set the pitcher down on Dad's workbench and fixed me with a look that probably used to terrify misbehaving second graders. "Honey, I've been watching this family for 15 years. I saw you leave for college with 2 scholarships and a heart full of dreams. I saw you come home for holidays, always helping, always giving. And now I see you unpacking your life in a garage like you're some kind of refugee." Her words hit me with unexpected force. Maybe it was because she was the first person to acknowledge what was actually happening. Or maybe it was because she said it with such matter-of-fact clarity. But suddenly I felt tears threatening. "They needed Leo to have more space," I said, the explanation sounding weak even to my ears. "And you needed to come home to a family that valued you," Ellen shot back. "Looks like we can't all get what we need." She poured 2 glasses of lemonade and handed me one. It was perfectly tart, with just enough sweetness to balance the bite. "You know," she said, settling onto an overturned crate like she planned to stay a while. "I taught school for 43 years. You know what I learned? The good kids, the ones who never make trouble, who always do what's expected, they're the ones who get overlooked. The squeaky wheel gets the grease, but the well-oiled machine just keeps running until it breaks down." I took a sip of lemonade and tried to process what she was saying. "Your brother's a sweet boy, but he's always been the squeaky wheel. ADHD. Or not. He's learned that making noise gets him attention. You, on the other hand, learned that being good gets you praise. But praise isn't the same as consideration, is it?" "I don't want to be selfish," I said quietly. "Wanting to be seen isn't selfish, Marisol. Wanting to matter in your own family isn't selfish. And wanting more than a cot in a garage after working your tail off for 4 years definitely isn't selfish." The tears came then, silent and swift. I'd been holding them back for 2 days, telling myself I was being dramatic, that I should be grateful for any roof over my head. But Ellen's words gave me permission to feel what I'd been suppressing. "What am I supposed to do?" I asked through the tears. "They're my family. I love them." "Of course you do. And they love you too, in their way. But love without respect isn't enough, honey. Love without consideration is just sentiment." She stood up, brushing dust off her gardening clothes. "You know what I think you should do?" I looked up at her, desperate for guidance. I think you should. Stop making it easy for them to overlook you. Stop accepting less than you deserve just to keep the peace. And maybe, just maybe, start making some noise of your own. That evening, the family gathered for dinner like nothing had changed. Mom had made her famous enchiladas. The kitchen smelled like home, and for a moment I could almost pretend that everything was normal. Leo chattered about his summer school classes. Dad shared stories from the construction site, and Mom fussed over everyone's plates. But I couldn't stop thinking about Ellen's words. I watched the easy way my family interacted, the comfortable assumption that this arrangement, me in the garage, Leo in my room, was perfectly reasonable. No one asked how. I'd slept if I needed anything, if the situation was working for me. So, Mom said, finally turning her attention to me, have you started looking at job applications? Your cousin Maria said there might be something at the city planning office. The casual assumption that I'd stay in San Antonio, that I'd build my life around whatever scraps were available, rankled in a way it never had before. I'm still exploring my options, I said carefully. Well, don't wait too long, Dad added. Can't live in the garage forever. The statement hung in the air like a challenge. Can't live in the garage forever. But apparently I could live there for now, for however long was convenient for everyone else. Actually, I heard myself saying, I wanted to talk about that. The conversation stopped. 3 pairs of eyes turned to me, and I felt the weight of their attention like a physical thing. I've been thinking, I continued, my heart hammering against my ribs. Maybe we could work out a different arrangement. For my room, I mean. The silence stretched uncomfortably. Mom set down her fork, and I could see the careful blankness that came over her face when she was preparing to be disappointed in someone. Mija, she said gently. We've already discussed this. Leo needs the space. And I need more than a cot in the garage, I said, surprised by the firmness in my own voice. You're being dramatic, Mom said, but there was an edge to her voice now. It's a perfectly fine arrangement. You have privacy, your own space. In the garage, Mom, you put me in the garage. It's temporary, Dad interjected, his tone suggesting the conversation was over. But something had shifted in me during my talk with Ellen. For the first time in my life, I wasn't willing to swallow my feelings to keep everyone comfortable. How temporary? I asked. A week? A month? Until I find a job and move out? Because it feels like you've already decided that I don't get a vote in my own living situation. Leo looked between us, clearly uncomfortable with the tension. Maybe I could... This isn't about you, mijo, Mom said quickly, her protective instincts kicking in. And there it was. The truth laid bare. This wasn't about room sizes or ADHD accommodations or what was best for the family. This was about who mattered, whose comfort was prioritized, whose needs were considered non-negotiable. I was 22 years old, the first person in my family to graduate college, and I was sleeping in the garage while my teenage brother enjoyed the room I'd grown up in. And I was supposed to be grateful for it. For the first time since I'd come home, I felt something other than hurt and confusion. I felt angry. And anger, I was beginning to realize, might be exactly what I needed. The third day in the garage, I discovered the box. I'd been trying to organize my makeshift living space, creating some semblance of order in the chaos of Christmas decorations and garden tools, when I noticed a cardboard box tucked behind Dad's workbench. It was old, the kind of box that moves from house to house without anyone quite remembering what's inside. But something about it caught my attention. Maybe the way my name was written across the side in Mom's careful handwriting. Marisol, school, things. It read in faded blue ink. My hands shook a little as I pulled it free from its hiding place. Inside, I found treasures I'd forgotten existed. My elementary school report cards, all A's and glowing teacher comments. My middle school science, fair ribbons. The scholarship letter from UT that had made Mom cry happy tears. Photos from my high school graduation, where the whole family beamed with pride. But it was the letter at the bottom that stopped me cold. Telling and preparing this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. It was addressed to my parents, dated just 6 months ago, from the Dean of Liberal Arts at UT. A formal commendation letter, praising my academic achievement and noting that I'd been selected for the university's Outstanding Senior Award in Environmental Policy. The letter mentioned that I was graduating magna cum laude, that I'd been recommended for graduate programs, that I was a credit to your family and an exceptional young woman with a bright future. I read it 3 times, my throat getting tighter with each pass. They'd never mentioned receiving this letter, never told me about the dean's praise, never acknowledged that their daughter had achieved something genuinely remarkable. The sound of footsteps on the driveway made me quickly stuff everything back in the box. Mom appeared in the garage doorway, still in her scrubs from the night shift, looking exhausted, but determined to maintain her cheerful facade. "Good morning, mija. How did you sleep?" I held up the letter. "When did you get this?" Her face went through a series of expressions: surprise, recognition, and something that might have been embarrassment. "Oh, that old thing. I meant to tell you about it. It's dated 6 months ago, Mom. 6 months." She came into the garage, closing the door behind her. "It's been so crazy with Leo's school issues and my work schedule. It slipped my mind. The Dean of Liberal Arts wrote to tell you that your daughter was outstanding and it slipped your mind?" "Don't be dramatic, Marisol." There was that word again. Dramatic. The label that had been attached to any emotion I'd ever expressed that made anyone uncomfortable. "I'm not being dramatic. I'm being hurt. There's a difference." Mom sat down heavily on the crate that served as my makeshift chair. Up close, I could see the exhaustion in her face, the way her shoulders sagged with the weight of everything she carried. For a moment, my anger softened into something more complicated. "Mia, you have to understand. Leo's been struggling so much. The ADHD diagnosis, the medication adjustments, the meeting with teachers every week. You've always been so independent, so capable. I never had to worry about you." "And that's the problem," I said quietly. "You never worried about me, so you stopped seeing me." "That's not true. When was the last time you asked me how I was doing? Really asked, not just, how's school or do you need money? When was the last time you asked about my hopes, my fears, my dreams for the future?" Mom opened her mouth to answer, then closed it again. The silence stretched between us, heavy with recognition. "I see you," she said finally, but her voice lacked conviction. "You see what you need me to be. The good daughter who doesn't complain, who understands, who makes things easier for everyone else. But you don't see me." I gestured around the garage, at the cot, at the concrete floor, at the complete absence of comfort or consideration. "This isn't about Leo needing space. This is about you needing me to be invisible." The conversation was interrupted by my phone buzzing. Amara's name appeared on the screen, and I realized I couldn't avoid her calls much longer. "I need to take this," I told Mom, who looked relieved for the escape. "Mari!" Amara's voice burst through the phone like sunshine. "Finally! I've been dying to hear about your glorious homecoming. Tell me everything. Are your parents throwing you a party? Did they frame your diploma? I bet your mom cried happy tears for an hour." I walked outside into the backyard, needing space and air for this conversation. "It's complicated." "Complicated how?" "Wait, are you outside?" "Why do you sound like you're in an echo chamber?" "I'm in the backyard." "Why aren't you in your room? It's like 8 in the morning." The question I'd been dreading. I took a deep breath and told her everything. the garage, Leo's new room, the casual assumption that I'd be grateful for whatever space they gave me. The silence on the other end of the line stretched so long I thought the call had dropped. Amara, you there? I'm here. I'm just processing. Did you just tell me that your parents put you in the fucking garage? Language, I said automatically, a holdover from years of Mom's corrections. Don't you dare police my language right now, Marisol Vega. I will curse as much as I want when my best friend is being treated like a vagrant in her own home. Her outrage was both validating and overwhelming. For 4 years, Amara had been my anchor, the friend who called me on my people-pleasing tendencies and reminded me that I had value beyond what I could do for others. It's not that bad, I found myself saying, even though I didn't believe it. Stop. Stop doing that thing where you minimize your own experience to make everyone else comfortable. This is fucked up, Mari. This is genuinely, objectively fucked up. I don't know what to do. They're my family. And you're their family too. Family doesn't put family in the garage, sweetheart. I heard the sliding door open behind me and turned to see Leo stepping outside, holding a bowl of cereal. He looked uncertain, like he wanted to say something but wasn't sure if he should interrupt. I have to go, I told Amara. But let's talk more later, okay? We absolutely will. And Mari? You deserve better than this. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise. After I hung up, Leo approached hesitantly. Was that Amara? She sounds mad. She's protective, I said, settling onto the concrete steps that led to the backyard. She doesn't understand why I'm not raising hell about the living situation. Leo sat down beside me, quiet for a moment. Then, maybe she's right. I looked at him in surprise. What do you mean? I've been thinking about what you said yesterday, about not having a place in the family. And I keep thinking, I never had to fight for my place, you know? It was just always there. But you've been fighting for yours your whole life, and now they're asking you to fight from the garage. The maturity in his observation caught me off guard. When had my little brother gotten so wise? I offered to share the room, he continued, but Mom said no. She said it would be too disruptive for my routine. But what about your routine? What about what you need? Before I could answer, the side gate opened and Ellen appeared, carrying a small potted plant and wearing an expression of determination. Morning. You two, she said briskly. Marisol, I brought you a housewarming gift. She handed me the plant, a small succulent in a hand-painted pot. It's a jade plant. They're nearly impossible to kill, and they're supposed to bring good luck and prosperity. Thank you, I said, touched by the gesture. But I'm not sure the garage qualifies for housewarming gifts. Honey, anywhere you lay your head is your home, and every home deserves a blessing. She fixed Leo with one of her teacher stares. And, how are you adjusting to your new room, young man? Leo had the grace to look uncomfortable. It's nice, really big. I'm sure it is. Must be quite an upgrade from your old space. The comment hung in the air, not quite an accusation, but not exactly innocent either. Ellen had a way of saying things that made you examine your own behavior without feeling attacked. Mrs. Bartlow, Leo said suddenly, do you think it's weird that Mary's in the garage? Ellen's eyebrows went up slightly, but her voice remained neutral. I think it's interesting that you're asking me instead of your parents. I did ask them. Mom said it was temporary, and that Mari understood. Dad said it was practical. And what, do you think? Leo looked at me, then back at Ellen. I think my sister shouldn't be living like she's camping in her own house. Something shifted in the dynamic between the three of us. Ellen nodded approvingly, and I felt a surge of gratitude for both of them, for Ellen's unflinching honesty and for Leo's growing awareness. You know, Ellen said thoughtfully, when I was your age, Leo, my family moved my older sister to the basement when my cousin came to live with us. She never complained, just like your sister isn't complaining. You know what happened? What? She left. Went to live with our aunt in California and barely spoke to us for 10 years. Not because she was angry, but because she learned that her comfort didn't matter to the people who were supposed to love her most. The story hit its mark. Leo's face went pale, and I felt my own chest tighten with recognition. Families make choices every day about who matters and how much, Ellen continued. Sometimes those choices are subtle, like room assignments. Sometimes they're obvious, like who gets the last piece of cake or whose schedule everyone else revolves around. But they're always choices. That afternoon, while Mom slept and Dad was at work, Leo came to find me in the garage. I was sitting on my cot, typing a job application on my laptop and trying to ignore the industrial humming of the fluorescent light. "Mari," he said from the doorway, "I want to show you something." He led me to his room, my old room, and I braced myself for another wave of displacement. But instead of the defensive teenager I'd expected, I found someone who seemed genuinely troubled. "Look at this," he said, gesturing around the space. "Really look at it." I saw his gaming setup, his clothes, his posters. But I also saw the careful way he'd arranged everything, leaving one corner completely empty. "That's where your desk used to be," he said quietly. I left it empty because putting my stuff there felt wrong. On the windowsill sat a small framed photo, the two of us at my high school graduation, both grinning at the camera. I remembered Mom taking that picture, how proud Leo had looked standing next to his big sister. "I miss you," he said simply. "I know that sounds stupid because you're literally 50 feet away, but I miss having you here, in the house, part of things." The honesty in his voice broke something open in my chest. "I miss you too, Leo. What if we came up with a different plan? Something Mom and Dad couldn't say no to? Like what? I don't know yet. But Ellen was right about families making choices. Maybe it's time we help them make a better choice." For the first time since I'd come home, I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe I didn't have to accept this situation passively. Maybe there was a way to reclaim my place in this family without destroying it in the process. That night, as I lay on my cot listening to the familiar sounds of the house settling around me, I thought about choices. The choice to be grateful versus the choice to demand better. The choice to keep the peace versus the choice to speak the truth. The choice to accept less than I deserved versus the choice to fight for my worth. Tomorrow, I decided, I would start making different choices. The jade plant sat on my makeshift nightstand, its thick leaves catching the harsh fluorescent light. "Nearly impossible to kill," Ellen had said. I was beginning to think the same thing might be true about hope. The plan came to me during my morning run through the neighborhood, a habit I'd developed in college to clear my head and process stress. The familiar rhythm of my feet on pavement, the early morning quiet before the Texas heat became unbearable, always helped me think more clearly. I'd been living in the garage for a week, and the situation had settled into an uncomfortable routine. Mom worked her night shifts and slept during the day. Dad left for construction sites before dawn. Leo attended summer school, and I existed in the spaces between their lives, applying for jobs from my concrete-floored exile and trying to pretend everything was normal. But Ellen's words kept echoing in my mind. "Stop making it easy for them to overlook you." The idea that crystallized during my run was simple, maybe even elegant. If my family needed to see the impact of their choices, I would show them. If they wanted me to be invisible, I would make my absence impossible to ignore. I found Leo in the kitchen when I got back, stirring sugar into a bowl of cereal with the concentrated focus of someone trying to achieve perfect sweetness distribution. "Leo," I said, settling into the chair across from him, "I want to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me." He looked up, milk dripping from his spoon. "Okay. Do you think Mom and Dad would notice if I wasn't here for a few days?" His eyebrows drew together. What do you mean, not here? I mean, if I went somewhere else. Stayed with a friend, maybe. Do you think they'd miss me? Or would they just be relieved not to have to feel guilty about the garage situation? Leo set down his spoon, suddenly very serious. Where would you go? Amara's been asking me to visit her in Austin. I could drive. Up there, spend a few days, see what opportunities look like in a bigger city. You're thinking about moving to Austin? The possibility hadn't occurred to me until I said it out loud. But as soon as the words left my mouth, I realized it wasn't just a theoretical question. Austin meant better job prospects, graduate school possibilities, distance from the complicated dynamics of home. Maybe, I said honestly. But first, I want to see how this family functions when I'm not here to smooth things over. Leo's expression shifted to something like alarm. What do you mean, smooth things over? Who do you think has been doing your laundry since you started summer school? Mom? Mom's been working double shifts all week. Try again. The realization dawned slowly across his face. You've been doing my laundry. And grocery shopping when Dad forgets. And picking up Mom's prescriptions. And fixing the garbage disposal when it started acting up. And covering the water bill when it came in higher than expected because someone's been taking 40-minute showers. Each item on the list seemed to hit him like a small revelation. I didn't know. That's the point. Nobody knows. Because I just handle things. I've been home for a week, living in the garage, and I've been taking care of this family's needs without anyone even noticing. So what happens if you leave? That's what I want to find out. Leo pushed his cereal around the bowl, thinking. How long would you be gone? A few days? Maybe a week. And you wouldn't tell them where you went? I'd tell them I was safe. But I wouldn't make it easy for them to dismiss my absence. The conversation was interrupted by the sound of Mom's car in the driveway. She was coming home early from her shift, which usually meant either the hospital had been slow or something was wrong. Think about what I said, I told Leo quietly, as Mom's key turned in the front door. She appeared in the kitchen a moment later, still in her scrubs, but moving with the careful deliberation of someone fighting exhaustion. Morning, babies, she said, kissing the top of Leo's head and squeezing my shoulder as she passed. I'm beat. Double shift ran long. You should sleep, I said, already reaching for the coffee pot to make her the chamomile tea that always helped her unwind. In a minute. I need to put in some laundry first, and I think we're out of milk and I'll handle it, I said automatically. You're an angel, mija. I don't know what I'd do without you. The casual gratitude, offered without thought or recognition of what I'd already been doing, crystallized my resolve. I handed her the tea and watched her shuffle toward her bedroom, already half asleep on her feet. Leo looked at me across the kitchen table, understanding dawning in his eyes. That afternoon, while Mom slept and Leo was at school, I called Amara. Please tell me you're calling to say you've come to your senses and told your family where they can shove their garage arrangement, she said by way of greeting. Not exactly. But I am calling to ask if your offer to visit is still open. Are you serious? Yes. When? How long? Oh my God. Mari, this is the best news I've had all week. Her enthusiasm was infectious, and for the first time in days, I felt something like excitement. I was thinking I could drive up tomorrow, stay for a few days, maybe look at some job opportunities while I'm there. Yes, absolutely. You can crash. In my apartment as long as you want. It's tiny, but it's got real walls and everything. After we hung up, I sat in the garage organizing my thoughts and my belongings. I would pack light, leave a note that was honest, but not melodramatic, and give my family a chance to experience the absence they seemed so comfortable with. Ellen appeared in the garage doorway around 4 o'clock, carrying 2 glasses of iced tea and wearing an expression of frank curiosity. That's a traveling bag, she observed, noting the small suitcase I'd pulled from under my cot. very observant. Going somewhere? I accepted the iced tea gratefully and considered how much to share. Ellen had become an unexpected confidant, someone who could see the situation clearly because she wasn't emotionally invested in maintaining family harmony at any cost. Austin. To visit a friend. How long? I'm not sure yet. Ellen settled onto the crate that had become the garage's unofficial guest chair. Your family know you're going? They will. But they don't yet. Not yet. She nodded slowly, sipping her tea. Sometimes people need to lose something before they realize its value. Is that what I'm doing? Manipulating them? Honey, there's a difference between manipulation and natural consequences. Manipulation is trying to control someone else's behavior through deception. Natural consequences are what happen when people have to live with the choices they've made. The distinction felt important, though I wasn't entirely sure I believed it applied to my situation. Your family has made a series of choices, Ellen continued. They chose to prioritize your brother's comfort over yours. They chose to assume you'd be grateful for less than you deserve. They chose to take your contributions for granted. Now they get to experience the natural consequence of those choices. Which is? Having to function without the person who's been holding things together. That evening, the family gathered for dinner as usual. Dad had stopped for takeout Chinese food, a Friday tradition that had started when I was in middle school. We sat around the kitchen table, passing containers of lo mein and sweet and sour pork, the conversation comfortable and familiar. I watched the dynamics more carefully than usual, noting the small ways I'd been integrated into the family's functioning, without anyone realizing it. When Leo needed a napkin, his eyes automatically went to me. When Dad mentioned that his work shirt had a stain, Mom's response was to glance in my direction with the assumption that I'd handle it. When Mom's phone buzzed with a text, she asked me to check it while she served the food. Small things, invisible things, but they added up to a pattern of dependence that no one had acknowledged. I'm going to Austin tomorrow, I said during a lull in the conversation. The casual announcement had the desired effect. 3 pairs of eyes turned to me with varying degrees of surprise. Austin? Mom repeated. Why? To visit Amara, and to look at some opportunities. What kind of opportunities? Dad asked, his voice carefully neutral. Job opportunities. Maybe graduate school. The silence that followed felt loaded with implications. How long will you be gone? Leo asked. I'm not sure yet. A few days, maybe longer. But you're coming back, Mom said, and something in her tone made it not quite a question. I don't know. The honesty of the answer seemed to shock them. For the first time since I'd been home, I had their complete attention. Mija, Mom said, carefully. Are you upset about something? The question was so perfectly calibrated to miss the point that I almost laughed. I'm not upset, Mom. I'm reassessing. Reassessing what? Whether this is where I belong? Dad set down his chopsticks. Of course this is where you belong. Your family. Family that sleeps in the garage? It's temporary, he said. But there was less conviction in his voice than before. Everything's temporary, Dad. The question is, how long I'm willing to wait for it to change. After dinner, Leo followed me to the garage while I finished packing. He sat on the cot, watching me fold clothes with unusual attention. Are you really not coming back? He asked. I honestly don't know. Because of the room thing? I stopped packing and looked at him directly. It's not about the room, Leo. It's about feeling like I matter to this family. You do matter, do I? Because from where I'm sitting, it feels like I matter for what I can do for everyone else, not for who I am. He was quiet for a long moment. Then, what would it take for you to come back? The question surprised me with its directness. I don't know. Maybe I need to figure out who I am when I'm not trying to be the daughter everyone needs me to be. And, "You can't do that here?" "Not in the garage." That night, I lay on the cot for what might be the last time, listening to the familiar sounds of the house around me. Through the thin walls, I could hear my parents talking in low voices. Though I couldn't make out the words, the conversation went on for a long time. At some point, I heard footsteps in the kitchen, then the soft sound of someone crying. The tears weren't loud or dramatic, just the quiet weeping of someone trying to process an unexpected loss. I wanted to get up, to go comfort whoever was crying, to smooth things over the way I always did. But for once, I stayed where I was. Tomorrow, I would drive to Austin. Tomorrow, my family would have to function without me. Tomorrow, we would all learn something about what my presence in their lives actually meant. The jade plant sat on my makeshift nightstand, its thick leaves reflecting the harsh fluorescent light. I touched one of the leaves gently, remembering Ellen's words about things that were nearly impossible to kill. Maybe that was true about hope. Maybe it was true about love too. And maybe, just maybe, it was true about me. I was loading my suitcase into my old Honda Civic when Leo burst through the garage door, still in his pajamas and clutching something in his hand. "Mari, wait. You need to see this before you go." His face was flushed with the urgency of someone who'd been running, and his hair stuck up at angles that suggested he'd just rolled out of bed. It was barely 7 in the morning, but he was wide awake in a way that immediately put me on alert. "Leo, I really need to get on the road, please. Just look at this first." He thrust a manila folder into my hands. The tab read, Marisol College Fund, in Dad's careful print. The same handwriting I'd seen on grocery lists and work schedules my entire life. "Where did you get this?" "Dad's filing cabinet. In the closet in his and Mom's room." "You went through Dad's papers?" Leo had the grace to look embarrassed. "I couldn't sleep after what you said yesterday, about not knowing if you mattered. So I started thinking about all the stuff you do that nobody notices, and then I started thinking about other stuff nobody talks about, and..." He gestured helplessly at the folder. "Just open it." My hand shook slightly as I lifted the cover. Inside were bank statements, deposit slips, and a savings account summary that made my breath catch in my throat. The account was in my name, opened when I was 10 years old. For 12 years, Dad had been making regular deposits, sometimes $20, sometimes $50, sometimes just $5 when money was tight. The statements showed a steady accumulation of funds that had grown, through interest and Dad's careful contributions, to nearly $8,000. $8,000, saved quietly, methodically, without fanfare or acknowledgement, throughout my entire adolescence. "I don't understand," I whispered, flipping through page after page of evidence that my father had been planning for my future since before I even knew I wanted a future. "Keep reading," Leo said urgently. "There's more." At the bottom of the folder was a letter, written in Dad's careful block printing on lined notebook paper. It was addressed to me, though the date suggested it had been written months ago. "Mija, if you're reading this, it means something happened to me or your mother asked me to finally give this to you. I started this account when you were little because even then I could see you were going to do something special with your life. You were always the one asking questions, always thinking about how to make things better. I know I'm not good with words the way your mother is, and I know I don't always show you how proud I am. But I want you to know that every dollar in this account represents a day when I thought about your future and felt proud to be your father. The money is for whatever comes next. College, graduate school, or just giving you time to figure out what you want without having to worry about rent. You've worked so hard, mija. You deserve to have choices. Your mother doesn't know about this account. I wanted it to be something just between us, father to daughter. She worries about money too much, and I didn't want her to think we couldn't afford it, or that I was taking away from Leo. But you both deserve to have dreams, and dreams cost money. I love you, Marisol. I'm sorry if I don't say it enough. I'm sorry if I don't show it the right way. But I hope this helps you understand that you have always mattered to me. You have always been seen. Papa, I read the letter 3 times before the words fully penetrated. When I looked up, Leo was watching, me with anxious eyes. There's something else, he said quietly. I found it in the same cabinet. He handed me a second folder, this one containing correspondence between my parents and the mortgage company. The documents were confusing at first. Refinancing papers, payment modification requests, second mortgage applications. But as I read through them, a pattern emerged that made my stomach clench with understanding. My parents had been struggling financially for years. Dad's construction work was seasonal and unpredictable. Mom's nursing salary was steady, but modest. They'd refinanced the house twice to cover Leo's medical expenses and therapy costs. The second mortgage payment was 3 months behind. But buried in the paperwork was evidence of something else. Regular transfers from my parents' checking account to cover my college expenses that weren't covered by scholarships. Room and board payments, textbook allowances, emergency funds when my campus job didn't provide enough hours. Payments I'd never asked for, never even known about. They never told me, I said, more to myself than to Leo. They never tell us anything, Leo said. I only found this stuff because I was looking for something else entirely. I sat down heavily on the concrete floor, the folders scattered around me like evidence in a trial I didn't understand. Everything I thought I knew about my family's financial situation, about their priorities, about their feelings toward me, was being rewritten with each document I read. Leo, I said slowly, how long have you known about this? I found it 2 days ago, right after you told me about maybe leaving. I was trying to understand why they put you in the garage if they... He gestured vaguely at the papers. If they clearly care about you this much. And what did you figure out? I think they're scared. Scared of what? Leo sat down on the floor next to me, his teenage gangly limbs folding awkwardly. I think they're scared that if they tell you how much money they've spent on you, you'll feel guilty. And I think they're scared that if they tell you how proud they are, you'll leave anyway. The insight from my 15-year-old brother hit me with unexpected force. So they put me in the garage instead? I think they put you in the garage because it felt temporary and safe. Like, if they made it too comfortable, you might stay forever and never do the big things they've been saving money to help you do. But if they made it too uncomfortable, you might leave and never come back. That's the most twisted logic I've ever heard. Yeah. Well, adults are pretty twisted sometimes. We sat in silence for a moment, surrounded by the evidence of my parents' secret generosity and poor communication skills. Outside, I could hear the neighborhood coming to life. Lawn mowers starting up, dogs barking, the distant sound of kids playing in sprinklers. There's one more thing, Leo said hesitantly. I heard Mom and Dad talking last night after you said you might not come back. What did they say? Dad cried. The simple statement hit me harder than all the bank statements and letters combined. Dad doesn't cry. I know. That's why I'm telling you. He said he didn't know how to show you that you mattered without making you feel guilty for costing money. And Mom said she didn't know how to ask you to stay without admitting she needs you more than you need her. And what did you think? I thought maybe we're all really bad at talking to each other. A car door slammed somewhere in the neighborhood, and I realized that my planned escape to Austin was becoming more complicated by the minute. The narrative I'd constructed, of being undervalued and overlooked, was bumping up against evidence of love expressed in ways I hadn't recognized. What are you going to do? Leo asked. Before I could answer, the side door opened, and Mom appeared, still in her robe but clearly awake and alert. Her eyes went immediately to the papers scattered around us, and her face went through a series of expressions that ended on something like resignation. Leo showed you, she said simply. Why didn't you tell me? I asked. Mom came into the garage and sat down on my cot, looking suddenly older than her 45 years. Because we didn't want you to feel trapped by our investment in you. Trapped? Mija, we've been saving and sacrificing for your education since you were little, but we never wanted you to choose your life based on paying us back or staying close because you felt obligated. We wanted you to be free to make decisions based on what was best for you. So you put me in the garage? We put you in the garage because... She paused, struggling with words. Because we didn't know how to treat you like the adult you've become, while still making you feel like you belong in this house. The honesty in her voice was devastating. That makes no sense, Mom. I know. But when you came home with your degree and your confidence and your independence, I panicked. You seemed so capable, so ready to take on the world. And I thought, if we make things too easy, she'll never leave. And if we make things too hard, she'll leave and never come back. The garage felt like a middle ground. It felt like rejection. I know that now. Dad's voice from the doorway interrupted us. Is this a private conversation? Or can the man who's been crying about his daughter leaving join in? He stood in the entrance to the garage, still in his work clothes but clearly not headed to a job site. His eyes were red-rimmed and his usually composed expression was raw with emotion. Leo told you about last night, he said, not making it a question. Dad, no, let me say this. I've been practicing all morning. He cleared his throat formally. Marisol Elena Vega, you are the smartest, most capable, most determined person. I know. You are the first person in our family to graduate from college, and you did it with honors while working 2 jobs and still finding time to help your family. I am so proud of you that I don't have words big enough to contain it. The formal speech, delivered in his serious construction foreman voice, was so quintessentially Dad that I felt tears starting. I saved money for you because I believe in your future, he continued. I gave your room to Leo because I thought you were too good for this house now, not because you didn't deserve a place in it. And I'm sorry that my way of loving you felt like being forgotten. Dad, I'm not finished. If you want your room back, Leo can move to the garage. If you want to stay in the garage, we'll put in proper flooring and a window and a real bed. If you want to go to Austin or anywhere else, we'll support you with the money we saved and our blessing. But I need you to know that you will always have a place in this family, and that place will never be conditional on you being convenient or undemanding or grateful for less than you deserve. The speech ended abruptly, as if he'd run out of the words he'd been practicing. In the silence that followed, I could hear my own heartbeat and the distant sound of Mrs. Bartlow watering her garden next door. Can I have a minute to think? I asked. My family exchanged glances, then began to file out of the garage. Leo squeezed my shoulder as he passed, and Mom kissed the top of my head. Dad paused in the doorway. For what it's worth, Mija, I think you should go to Austin. Not because we don't want you here, but because you should see what else is possible. You can always come home. When they were gone, I sat alone in the garage with the scattered papers and the jade plant and the choice that would define the next chapter of my life. Everything had changed in the span of an hour. My family's love for me hadn't been absent. It had been expressed in a language I didn't recognize. Their sacrifice hadn't been invisible. It had been deliberately hidden to protect my independence. I thought about Amara waiting for me in Austin, about job opportunities and graduate programs, and the future I'd been planning. Then I thought about the bank account with 12 years of faith deposited $5 at a time, and the letter written in my father's careful handwriting, and the way my mother had looked when she admitted her fears. I picked up my phone and started to dial. The phone rang 3 times before Amara picked up. "Please tell me you're calling from the road," she said without preamble. "I've been cleaning my apartment all morning, and I even bought the good coffee." "Amara, I need to tell you something, and I need you to listen without trying to fix it. Okay?" The change in my tone must have alerted her because her voice immediately became more serious. What's wrong? Are you okay? I told her everything. The bank account, the letters, the revelation about my parents' hidden sacrifices and twisted logic. I told her about Dad crying, and Mom's admission of fear, and Leo's unexpected wisdom. By the time I finished, I was crying. Too, sitting on the concrete floor of the garage with my phone pressed to my ear and my carefully planned escape route crumbling around me. Holy shit, Amara said when I finished. Wow. That's not what I was expecting. I know. I feel like everything I thought I understood about my family was wrong. Not wrong, she said carefully. Just incomplete. They love you, Mari. They always have. They just suck at showing it in ways that make sense to anyone else. So what do I do? What do you want to do? It was such a simple question, but it stopped me cold. For weeks, I'd been reacting to what other people wanted, what other people decided, what other people thought was best. I'd been so focused on feeling seen and valued that I'd stopped asking myself what I actually wanted. I don't know, I admitted. Okay, let's try this differently. If you could wave a magic wand and make this situation exactly what you wanted it to be, what would that look like? I closed my eyes and tried to imagine it. I want to feel like I belong here without having to make myself smaller. I want my family to see me as an adult, but still make space for me as their daughter. I want to know that my presence matters, but I also want the freedom to leave if that's what's best for me. And do you think that's possible? Maybe, but not from the garage. Then tell them that. It's not that simple. Why not? The question forced me to examine my own resistance. Why was I making this more complicated than it needed to be? Because I'm scared, I said finally. I'm scared that if I ask for what I want directly, they'll say no. Or they'll say yes but resent it. Or they'll make it about Leo and his needs again. And you're scared that if you don't ask for what you want, you'll end up living in garages for the rest of your life, metaphorically speaking. Exactly. So you're scared either way. Pretty much. Then you might as well be scared while asking for what you want. After we hung up, I sat in the garage for a long time, thinking. The morning sun was streaming through the small window near the ceiling, casting geometric shadows across the concrete floor. My suitcase sat by the door, packed and ready for a journey I was no longer sure I wanted to take. Around noon, Ellen appeared in the doorway carrying a plate of sandwiches and wearing an expression of frank curiosity. Heard there was some excitement this morning, she said, settling onto her usual crate. Figured you might be hungry. I accepted a sandwich gratefully, peanut butter and jelly cut into perfect triangles, the kind of comfort food that required no decision-making. Did Leo tell you about the papers? Leo didn't have to tell me anything. I've been watching your father save money in coffee cans and old shoeboxes for years. Man's been planning for your future since you were shorter than my garden fence. You knew? Honey, I know everything that happens in this neighborhood. Your father's been working overtime every summer since you started high school, taking on weekend jobs, turning down fishing trips with his buddies. You think that was for his own entertainment? The revelation that Ellen had been observing my family's sacrifices from the outside added another layer to my understanding. Why didn't anyone tell me? Because your parents are idiots, Ellen said, cheerfully. Well-meaning idiots, but idiots nonetheless. They got it in their heads that love meant protecting you from the burden of their investment in you. Never occurred to them that knowing about their sacrifice might actually make you feel more valued, not less. And you never said anything? Not my place. Though I've been tempted plenty of times, especially this week when you've been moping around here like a lost puppy. I took a bite of sandwich and tried to organize my thoughts. Ellen, can I ask you something? Shoot. What would you do? If you were me? She was quiet for a moment, chewing thoughtfully. When I was about your age, I had a similar choice to make. Not about family, but about staying in a situation that felt small or taking a risk on something bigger. What did you do? I stayed. Married my high school boyfriend, taught at the local elementary school, had a nice, safe, predictable life. She paused, looking out at the small window. It wasn't a bad life, but it wasn't the life I dreamed about when I was 22. Do you regret it? I regret not knowing that I could have both, that I could take risks and still come home. That loving my family didn't mean limiting myself to their vision of what was possible for me. The sandwich suddenly tasted like cardboard. So, you think I should go to Austin? I think you should stop asking other people what you should do and start asking yourself what you want to do. But I also think you should have that conversation with your family before you make any big decisions. What kind of conversation? The kind where you tell them exactly what you need and give them a chance to meet you halfway. That afternoon, I found myself in an unlikely place having an even more unlikely conversation. Leo and I were sitting on his bed, my old bed, in the room that had become the symbol of everything wrong with my place in the family. But instead of the bitter confrontation I'd expected, we were problem-solving together. Okay, Leo said, pulling out a notebook and a pencil like we were planning a military operation. Let's figure this out logically. Since when are you logical? Since you taught me how to make pro and con lists for every major decision. Remember? You made me do one when I couldn't decide whether to take advanced math or stick with regular. I did remember. It had been during one of my visits home from college, and Leo had been struggling with course selection for his sophomore year. Sat with him for hours, helping him think through the implications of each choice. Okay, I said, settling cross-legged on the bed. What are we analyzing? Your living situation options. He drew a line down the middle of the page. Option 1, you move back into this room and I go to the garage. Leo, I don't want you to... Just let me finish the analysis, okay? We're being logical, remember? He scribbled notes in both columns. Pros. You get your old room back. I get privacy in the garage. Everyone feels like justice has been served. Cons. The garage is still not a good living situation, just with a different person in it. That's a pretty big con. Exactly. Option 2. We share this room somehow. Bunk beds or a schedule or something. We both looked around the space, trying to imagine how that would work. The room was bigger than Leo's old room, but not big enough for two people with different schedules and needs. That's going to be awkward when I bring dates home, I said. When you bring dates home? How about when I bring dates home? You're 15. I'm not going to be 15 forever. Despite everything, I found myself laughing. Okay, point taken. What's option 3? Option 3. We convince Mom and Dad to finish the garage properly. Like, really finish it. Insulation, proper flooring, a real window, maybe even a small bathroom. The idea had merit. The garage was large enough to be comfortable if it was properly converted, and it would give whoever lived there genuine privacy and independence. That would cost money, I pointed out. Money they've apparently been saving for your future anyway. I looked at my brother with new respect. When did you get so smart? I've always been smart. I just used to use my intelligence for video games and avoiding chores. We spent the next hour sketching out possibilities, researching costs on his laptop, and developing what was beginning to look like an actual plan. The more we talked, the more excited we both became about the idea of converting the garage into a real living space. It could be like your own apartment, Leo said, showing me pictures of garage conversions he'd found online. But still connected to the house. You'd have independence, but also family. And when I do eventually move out, it could be your space. Or Mom and Dad could rent it out for extra income. Win-win-win. The enthusiasm was contagious, but I felt the need to inject some realism into our planning session. Leo, this is assuming Mom and Dad go for it, and assuming they can afford it, and assuming I even want to stay in San Antonio long-term. Do you want to stay long-term? It was the question I'd been avoiding all week. I don't know. Maybe. I love this city, and there are opportunities here I haven't explored. But I also don't want to feel trapped. What if staying didn't mean being trapped? What if it meant choosing to be here because it's where you want to be, not because it's where you ended up? The distinction felt important, though I wasn't sure I fully understood it yet. Our planning session was interrupted by the sound of voices in the living room. Mom and Dad were home, and they seemed to be having an intense conversation with someone. Leo and I exchanged glances, then crept down the hallway to eavesdrop. "Can't believe you told her about the savings account," Mom was saying. "She needed to know," Dad replied. "We should have told her years ago." "But what if she feels obligated now? What if she stays because she thinks she owes us something?" A third voice chimed in, Ellen's distinctive tone carrying clearly from the living room. "Rosa, honey, you're borrowing trouble. That girl's got a good head on her shoulders. Give her some credit." Leo and I looked at each other in surprise. Ellen was in our living room, apparently mediating a family crisis. "We just want what's best for her," Mom continued. "We want her to have choices." "Then give her choices," Ellen said firmly. "Real choices, with real information. Stop trying to protect her from your love. Let her decide what to do with it." "What if she decides to leave?" Dad asked, and there was something broken in his voice. "Then she leaves, and you'll be proud that you raised a daughter brave enough to chase her dreams. And maybe she'll come back, and maybe she won't. But either way, she'll know she's loved." The conversation continued, but I'd heard enough. I grabbed Leo's arm and pulled him back toward his room, my mind racing with new understanding. "They're terrified," I whispered. "Of course they are. You're their first kid to become a real adult. They don't know how to love you without controlling you. And I don't know how to be loved without feeling suffocated. So maybe you all need to learn together." That evening, I made a decision. I walked into the living room where my parents were, sitting on the couch, Ellen having returned to her own house after what appeared to have been a thorough intervention. "I want to call a family meeting," I announced. Mom and Dad exchanged glances. "A family meeting?" Mom repeated. "Yes. Leo, too. Tomorrow night, after dinner. I have some things I want to discuss, and I want everyone to have a chance to be heard." "What kind of things?" Dad asked. "The kind where we figure out how to be a family that includes adults," I said. "The kind where we tell the truth about what we need and what we can offer. The kind where we make decisions together instead of for each other." Dad nodded slowly. "Okay, a family meeting it is." That night, I lay on my cot for what I hoped would be one of the last times, thinking about courage and choices and the difference between being loved and being seen. Tomorrow, I would ask my family for what I wanted directly, without apology or equivocation. The jade plant sat on my nightstand, its thick leaves catching the harsh fluorescent light. "Nearly impossible to kill," Ellen had said. I was beginning to understand that the same might be true about family bonds. They could be bent and twisted, and neglected, but they were surprisingly hard to break completely. Tomorrow, we would find out if they were strong enough to be rebuilt. The family meeting convened at 7 o'clock sharp the next evening, around our kitchen table that had hosted countless homework sessions, birthday celebrations, and difficult conversations over the years. But this felt different, more formal, more intentional. I'd spent the day preparing notes and thinking through what I wanted to say, while Leo had apparently briefed Mom and Dad on our garage conversion research. "Before we start," I said, looking around at my family, "I want to establish some ground rules. Everyone gets to speak without interruption. No one has to agree with anyone else, but everyone has to listen. And we're going to tell the truth, even if it's uncomfortable." Mom shifted in her chair, already looking nervous. "Mija, this feels very serious." "It is serious, Mom. We're talking about whether I have a future in this family, and if so, what that looks like." The bluntness of the statement seemed to land like a physical blow. Dad's face went pale, and Mom's eyes immediately filled with tears. "Of course you have a future in this family," Dad said quickly. "You're our daughter." "Being your daughter and having a place in this family aren't necessarily the same thing," I replied gently, "and that's what we need to figure out." I pulled out the notes I'd prepared, my hands steadier than I'd expected. "I want to start by saying that I love all of you. Leo, you're growing into an amazing young man, and I'm proud to be your sister. Mom, you work harder than anyone I know, and you've sacrificed more for this family than we probably realize. Dad, finding out about the savings account and reading your letter meant more to me than I can express." Pause. Breath. The hard part. But love isn't enough if it doesn't come with respect and consideration. And respect isn't enough if it doesn't translate into actions that make someone feel valued. "What do you mean?" Mom asked quietly. "I mean, the putting me in the garage, however good your intentions were, told me that my comfort doesn't matter. Taking my room without asking told me that my feelings don't factor into family decisions. Assuming I'd be grateful for whatever space you gave me told me that you don't see me as someone with legitimate needs and wants." Leo nodded encouragingly from across the table. "We'd rehearsed this part, and he'd help me figure out how to be direct without being cruel. Now," I continued, "I understand that you were trying to balance a lot of competing needs. Leo needed stability and space. Money was tight. I seemed independent and capable. You thought you were doing what was best for everyone." "We were," Mom said, a defensive edge creeping into her voice. "You were doing what you thought was best," I corrected. "But you made those decisions without including me in the conversation, and that's the real problem." Dad leaned forward, his work roughened, hands clasped on the table. "What should we have done differently? You should have asked me what I needed. You should have explained the financial situation and let me help problem solve. You should have treated me like a grown-up whose opinion mattered, instead of like a child who would accept whatever decision you made for her." The words came out more forcefully than I'd intended, and I saw Mom flinch. But I pressed on, knowing that if I didn't say everything now, I might never get the chance again. "I know about the money you've been sending for my college expenses," I said, pulling out copies of the bank statements Leo had found. "I know about the overtime shifts and the weekend jobs and the sacrifices you made that I never asked for. And I'm grateful. More grateful than I can express. But I'm also angry that you never told me." "We didn't want you to feel guilty," Mom said. "But not knowing made me feel invisible. It made me think that my education wasn't important to you, that you were just tolerating my ambitions instead of supporting them." "That's not," Dad started. "I know it's not what you intended, but it's what happened. And that's why we need to start communicating differently." I took a breath and looked around the table at my family. Really looked at them. Mom was crying quietly, Dad looked stricken, and Leo was watching everything with the intense focus of someone trying to memorize details. "I have a proposal," I said, pulling out the research Leo and I had compiled. "It's going to sound crazy at first, but I want you to hear me out." I laid out our garage conversion plan in detail. The costs, the timeline, the benefits for everyone involved. Leo jumped in with the technical details, showing them the pictures we'd found online and the preliminary cost estimates we'd calculated. "It would give me real independence while keeping me close to family," I explained. "It would solve the space issue without anyone having to sacrifice their room, and it would be an investment in the property that could benefit everyone long-term." Mom and Dad listened in silence, occasionally exchanging glances that I couldn't read. "How much would this cost?" Dad asked finally. "Around $8,000 for a basic conversion. More if we wanted to add a bathroom, but we could do that later." Dad's eyebrows went up. $8,000. That's about what you saved for my college fund," I finished. "I know. I'm asking you to invest that money in keeping me here instead of helping me leave." "But what about graduate school?" Mom asked. What about your career opportunities? Austin has so much more than San Antonio. Maybe. Or maybe San Antonio has opportunities I haven't discovered yet because I've been so focused on leaving that I never really looked at staying. I pulled out my laptop and showed them the research I'd been doing about environmental policy opportunities in San Antonio. City planning positions, nonprofit organizations, consulting firms that worked with municipal governments. I could stay here for a year, I said. Get some real-world experience, save money, build professional relationships. Then reassess whether graduate school makes sense, and if so, where. And if you decide you want to leave after a year? Dad asked. Then I leave, with your blessing, and whatever financial support you're able to provide. But I'd leave because I chose to pursue better opportunities, not because I felt pushed out of my own family. The silence that followed felt heavy with possibility. Finally, Leo spoke up. I think it's a good plan, he said. And I think Mari should get to make her own choices about her life, but with all the information she needs to make good choices. What does that mean? Mom asked. Leo looked at me for permission, and I nodded. He pulled out another folder, one I hadn't seen before. It means telling her about the house, he said simply. Leo, Dad said sharply. That's not... What about... The house? I interrupted. Leo looked between our parents, then at me. We might lose it. The house. That's why they've been so stressed about money, and why they were weird about you moving back in. They didn't want you to know we were in trouble. The revelation hit me like cold water. What kind of trouble? Dad sighed deeply, the sound of someone who'd been carrying a weight for too long. We're 3 months behind on the second mortgage. The bank has started foreclosure proceedings. How much do you owe? $18,000, plus penalties and fees. I felt the numbers clicking into place in my mind. So the money you saved for me isn't nearly enough to save the house, Dad finished. We've been trying to figure out how to tell you kids without scaring you. How long do we have? 6 months, maybe less. I looked around the table at my family, seeing them clearly for perhaps the first time. They weren't the strong, stable foundation I'd always taken for granted. They were people doing their best with limited resources, making impossible choices, protecting their children from problems they couldn't solve. Why didn't you tell me? I asked. Because you're 22, Mom said simply. You shouldn't have to worry about your parents' problems. You should be free to build your own life. But I'm not free if I don't have all the information, I pointed out. And you're not protecting me if you're making decisions based on problems I don't know exist. Another silence. This one charged with the weight of secrets finally revealed. Okay, I said finally. Here's what we're going to do. I pulled out a piece of paper and started writing, my mind working faster than it had in weeks. First, we're going to pool our resources and figure out a plan to save the house. I have some savings, and I can get a job immediately, even if it's just waiting tables while I look for something better. Leo, you're old enough to work part-time. I don't want you kids sacrificing your futures for our mistakes, Dad said firmly. It's not a sacrifice if it's a choice, I replied. And it's not your mistakes. It's medical bills, and a difficult economy and life happening to a family that loves each other. I continued writing, the plan taking shape as I spoke. Second, we're going to convert the garage, but we're going to do as much of the work ourselves as possible to keep costs down. Dad, you have construction skills. Leo and I can do the labor that doesn't require expertise. That could work, Dad said slowly, his practical mind already engaging with the problem. Third, I'm going to stay in San Antonio for at least a year. Not in the garage as it is now, and not because I have to, but because I want to. Because this is my family and my home, and I want to fight for both. Mom was crying openly now, but her tears looked different, less desperate, more relieved. Are you sure? She asked. About staying? About all of this? I looked around the table at my family. Complicated, flawed, loving, frustrating, and mine. I'm sure. But I need some things from you in return. Like what? Leo asked. Like being included in decisions that affect me. Like honesty about problems and challenges, even when they're scary. Like being treated as an adult member of this family, not a child who needs to be protected from reality. And like getting help with the emotional stuff, I added, looking directly at Mom and Dad. We're all terrible at talking to each other about feelings. Maybe we should get some help learning how to do that better. You mean therapy? Mom asked, her nurse's practicality already assessing the idea. I mean family therapy. Learning how to communicate better, how to support each other without suffocating, how to be a family that includes adults. Dad nodded slowly. That might not be a bad idea. So, I said, looking around the table, are we doing this? Are we figuring out how to be a family together? The yes came from all three of them at once, overlapping and emphatic, and followed immediately by hugs that felt different from any we'd shared before. More solid, more chosen, more real. Later that night, I called Amara to explain why I wouldn't be coming to Austin after all. So you're staying, she said after I'd told her everything. I'm staying, at least for now. And you're happy about that? I thought about the question seriously. I'm hopeful about it. I'm scared and excited and overwhelmed, but I'm hopeful. Good, she said firmly, because you deserve a family that fights for you as hard as you fight for them. I think maybe we're all learning how to do that. As I settled into my cot for what I hoped would be one of the last times, I thought about the strange journey the past week had taken. I'd started out feeling invisible and ended up more seen than I'd ever been. I'd planned to run away, and instead had chosen to dig in deeper. The jade plant sat on my nightstand, its thick leaves reflecting the harsh fluorescent light. Tomorrow, we would start the real work of becoming the family we'd decided to be. Nearly impossible to kill, Ellen had said. I was beginning to think she'd been talking about more than just plants. 6 months later, I was sitting in what had once been the garage, and was now officially my apartment, grading environmental impact assessments for the city planning department, and listening to the sounds of my family going about their evening routines. Through the new window Dad had installed, I could see Ellen's garden, where winter vegetables were already sprouting despite the November chill. The transformation of the space had been remarkable. What had started as a concrete box with fluorescent lighting was now a cozy studio apartment with laminate flooring, proper insulation, and actual walls instead of hanging sheets. Leo and I had spent countless weekend hours learning how to use power tools under Dad's patient instruction, and Mom had contributed her nursing precision to the detail work. The small bathroom we'd added in October was my favorite luxury. A real shower and toilet that meant I never had to traipse through the house in my pajamas again. But the bigger transformation had been in how we functioned as a family. The weekly family meetings Leo had suggested were now a regular tradition, and family therapy with Dr. Martinez had taught us all better ways to communicate our needs and boundaries. We still drove each other crazy sometimes, but now we talked about it, instead of letting resentment build up in silence. The house was no longer in danger of foreclosure. My job at the city planning office paid well enough that I could contribute meaningfully to the household expenses, and Leo's part-time work at the neighborhood grocery store covered his own expenses and then some. More importantly, we'd learned to approach financial challenges as a team instead of as secrets to be hidden from each other. My phone buzzed with a text from Amara. Status report, please. Are you still happy with your choice to stay? I looked around my apartment. At the desk where I worked on both city projects and the environmental consulting business I was slowly building on the side. At the bookshelf, filled with policy manuals and novels. At the small kitchen where I could make my own meals or easily join the family for dinner in the main house. It was exactly the kind of independence I'd wanted, balanced with exactly the kind of connection I'd needed. Still happy, I texted back. Still the right choice. A knock on my door interrupted my grading. Leo appeared, holding 2 cups of hot chocolate, and wearing the expression he got when he wanted to talk about something serious. "Got a minute?" he asked. "Always." "What's up?" He settled into the small armchair we'd rescued from a garage sale, suddenly looking older than his 16 years. "I've been thinking about college applications." "That's good. You're a junior now. It's time to start thinking about that." "Yeah, but here's the thing. I keep looking at schools far away, and I keep thinking about what happened with you. How Mom and Dad were so scared of you leaving that they almost pushed you away." I set down my papers and gave him my full attention. And I don't want that to happen with me. But I also don't want to stay just because I'm afraid of hurting their feelings. The question was more sophisticated than I'd expected from my teenage brother, but Leo had grown up a lot in the past 6 months. Watching our family nearly fall apart and then consciously rebuild itself had matured him in ways I was still discovering. "What do you want?" I asked. "Not what you think you should want, not what would make other people happy. What do you actually want?" "I want to study computer science, and I want to go somewhere with a really good program, even if it's far away. But I also want Mom and Dad to be proud instead of scared. They will be. Both." "How can you be sure?" "Because we learned something this year. We learned that love doesn't mean holding on tight. It means giving each other room to grow and trusting that the relationship is strong enough to survive distance and change." Leo sipped his hot chocolate thoughtfully. "Is that what you figured out? When you decided to stay?" "I figured out that I could stay because I chose to, not because I had to. And that made all the difference." We talked for another hour about colleges and majors, and the strange process of becoming an adult while still being someone's child. When he left, I felt a deep satisfaction in being able to offer the kind of guidance I'd wished for when I was making my own difficult choices. Later that evening, I joined my family for dinner as I did most nights. The rhythm of it had become comfortable. Leo setting the table while complaining about his chemistry homework, Mom sharing stories from the hospital, Dad offering updates on his latest construction project. But tonight felt special for reasons I couldn't quite name. "Mija," Mom said as we were clearing the dishes, "your father and I wanted to talk to you about something." The phrase that had once filled me with dread now just made me curious. "What's up?" Dad cleared his throat in the formal way that meant he'd been practicing what he wanted to say. "Rosa and I have been talking, and we think it's time we started treating your apartment like a real apartment." "What does that mean?" "It means we want you to pay rent," Mom said. "Not a lot, but something fair that reflects the value of the space." I must have looked surprised because they both started talking at once. "It's not because we need the money," Dad said quickly. "Well, we could use the money," Mom corrected, "but that's not the point. The point is that you're an adult with a good job, and adults pay for their living space," Dad continued. "It's about respect. For you and for the independence you've built." The gesture was so perfectly thoughtful, so exactly the kind of recognition I'd been craving that I felt tears starting. "How much?" I asked. $400 a month, Mom said, "including utilities. It's below market rate, but it reflects that you're family, and that you contribute to the household in other ways." "I think that's fair," I said. "Actually, I think it's perfect." That night, I called Ellen to tell her about the rent conversation and to check on her garden preparation for winter. "Sounds like your family's finally figured out how to love you properly," she said with satisfaction. "I think we're all still learning. But yeah, it feels like we're figuring it out." "You know what I think made the difference?" "What?" "You stopped accepting less than you deserved and started asking for what you needed. That gave them permission. To be honest about what they needed too." "Is that your professional opinion, Dr. Bartlow?" "That's my professional opinion as someone who's been watching families struggle with these issues for 73 years. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is refuse to make yourself smaller to fit other people's comfort zones." A year later, I was promoted to senior environmental planner at the city office, and my consulting business had grown enough that I was considering taking it full-time. Leo was accepted to 3 excellent computer science programs, including one in Austin that had him genuinely excited. Mom started a master's program in nursing administration, something she'd been putting off for years because she didn't think the family could handle the additional stress. And Dad surprised us all by suggesting we convert the detached storage she'd into a small rental unit, using the skills he'd developed during my apartment renovation. We could use the extra income, he said practically, and we're getting pretty good at this family communication thing. Might as well put it to use. The morning Leo left for college, I found Dad sitting in my apartment, drinking coffee and staring out the window at Ellen's garden. "You okay?" I asked. "I keep thinking about what you said that day in the garage, about feeling like you didn't have a place in this family." "Dad, that was 2 years ago. Things are different now." "I know, but I keep thinking about how close we came to losing you. Not just to Austin or wherever, but to losing the relationship entirely, because we were so bad at showing you that you mattered. But you didn't lose me, because you were brave enough to fight for your place here, because you refused to accept a cot in the garage as evidence of love." He turned to look at me directly, something that had become easier for him over the past 2 years. "I'm proud of you, mija. Not just for your achievements, but for your courage, for demanding better from us, and then helping us learn how to give it." The conversation was interrupted by the sound of a car pulling into the driveway. Through the window, I could see a young woman getting out of a compact car, looking around with the uncertain expression of someone who wasn't quite sure she was in the right place. "That's our new renter," Dad said, standing up to go greet her. "Graduate student at UTSA, environmental engineering." "Really? Really? Thought you might like having a professional colleague next door." I watched him walk outside to help the young woman with her boxes, his natural generosity evident in every gesture. This was how Dad showed love, through practical actions, through creating space, through building things that would last. The jade plant, now much larger and thriving in its sunny spot by the window, caught my attention. "Nearly impossible to kill," Ellen had said. I'd learned that was true about a lot of things: plants, hope, family bonds, the human capacity for growth and change. My phone buzzed with a text from Leo. "Made it to campus safely. Roommate seems cool. Mom crying yet?" She started crying when, "You loaded the car," I texted back. "But happy tears. She's proud of you." "Good. Love you, sis. Thanks for teaching me that it's okay to leave if you know you have a place to come back to." I looked around my apartment, at the life I'd built that was both independent and connected, both rooted and free. Outside, Dad was helping our new renter carry boxes. Mom was watering the plants on the front porch, and Ellen was probably watching it all from her kitchen window with the satisfaction of someone who'd seen a difficult story reach a good ending. This was home. Not the garage where I'd felt invisible, not some distant city where I'd felt anonymous, but this carefully constructed balance of independence and belonging that my family and I had built together. The jade plant caught the afternoon light, its thick leaves glowing with health and possibility, nearly impossible to kill, and apparently full of surprises about what was possible when given the right conditions to thrive. I opened my laptop and started working on a proposal for a new environmental initiative for the city, the kind of project that could make a real difference in people's lives. Outside, the sounds of my neighborhood continued. Children playing, neighbors talking over fences, the comfortable rhythms of a community where people knew each other's names and watched out for each other's families. This was what I'd chosen instead of Austin. This was what I'd fought for instead of accepting the garage. And every day, it felt more and more like the right choice. Nearly impossible to kill, I thought, touching one of the jade plant's leaves gently. Just like hope. Just like home. Just like love that finally knows how to show itself properly. 6. Months later, the garage had stopped being the garage. It had insulation now, and flooring that didn't scream every time her chair rolled back. Her dad had helped hang the drywall, and Leo had helped choose the paint. Sage with a hint of rebellion, he'd said, grinning. Her mom, ever the nurse, had insisted on an ergonomic desk chair and proper air filters. The fluorescent bulb had been replaced with soft lighting, and the cot was long gone. In its place stood a twin bed with a quilt stitched by her abuela years before she passed. They didn't call it the garage anymore. They called it Mari's place. It was her own apartment now, technically still attached to the house but emotionally rooted in something else, a symbol of recognition. Not just for her degree, or her hard work, or her financial sacrifices, but for her place in the family. Earned, yes, but no longer invisible. Family meetings had become a tradition. Weekly, sometimes bi-weekly if things got too busy. The first, few were awkward, everyone dancing around feelings they hadn't named in years. But slowly, with help from Dr. Martinez, their family therapist, the fog of unspoken expectations began to lift. They stopped speaking through guilt and started speaking from need. They learned to ask, to listen, to apologize. Even her mother. Rosa Vega still had trouble saying I was wrong. But she had mastered I hear you, and tell me more. And sometimes even, what do you need from me right now? Marisol noticed. Her father, Carlos, was quieter about it, but he showed up. Every Saturday with a new improvement for her space. Shelves for her books, a mini fridge, weatherproofing, strips for the winter chill. His love was still built from labor and presence. But now it came with words too. I'm proud of you, he'd said one evening after sealing the new bathroom tiles. Not just for what you've done, but for asking for what you needed. That had nearly undone her. She stayed in San Antonio, at least for now. She worked full-time at the city planning department and freelanced as an environmental policy consultant. The job let her shape her community, street by street, proposal by proposal. But her real transformation was internal. She was no longer apologizing for taking up space. And her brother? Leo was now 16 and constantly thinking about the future. He filled their conversations with talk of college and code, toggling between excitement and anxiety. But more than anything, he had become her co-conspirator in building a different family rhythm, one where silence didn't rule and fairness wasn't mistaken for favoritism. They still fought, of course, but now they fought toward understanding. One night in October, Leo stood in the threshold of her now cozy studio and asked, "Do you ever regret staying?" Marisol didn't hesitate. "No, I think staying was the bravest thing I've done." He nodded like he understood, and maybe he did. In early December, the jade plant bloomed. Ellen Bartlow, still a daily presence and forever nosy in the best ways, said it was rare for a jade plant to bloom indoors. They only flower when they're truly settled, she said, handing Mari a bag of her famous gingerbread cookies. Kind of like people. Marisol had smiled, placing the new buds near the window where the morning light landed. But the holidays stirred old ghosts. Her cousins were visiting from El Paso. That meant space was suddenly tight again. Her mother suggested casually if Mari could perhaps let the cousins use her space. Just for the weekend, mija, you could crash inside. Inside, where she had not slept in 6 months. The suggestion hit harder than it should have. Old instincts kicked in. She smiled politely. She almost agreed. But that night, she sat down at the kitchen table, family meeting style, and said, "I need us to talk about space again." Her parents listened, not defensively, not with the subtle exasperation that once marked such conversations. They asked questions. They considered, and they compromised. The cousins slept on an inflatable in the living room. Mari stayed in her apartment. Her father joked, "You're the only one with real property value now." Afterward, Marisol stood outside with Ellen, watching Leo string mismatched Christmas lights on the edge of the garage roof. The air was cold, scented faintly with tamales and cinnamon. Mari exhaled slowly, like she'd been holding that breath since June. "You taught them how to see you," Ellen said. Mari shook her head. "No, we learned to see each other." Ellen smiled like that was better. The holidays passed with less drama than expected. The cousins admired Marie's place. Her aunt cried when she heard about her job. Her mother even bragged, "My daughter's the one overseeing the new green space off Crockett Street." And Mari felt pride, not pressure. Still, shadows lingered. One night she found Leo standing in the kitchen, staring at a college flyer. "Do you think Mom and Dad will be okay if I leave?" he asked. "Do you want to stay?" "I want to go, but I want them to be okay about it. I don't want to be the next person they lose because they can't let go." Marisol looked at him. This boy who'd grown up alongside her, who had once slept in her room and now carried parts of her story into his own future. "They'll be okay," she said. "They weren't with me, not at first. But now, they're learning. They know what love looks like with open hands instead of clenched fists." Leo nodded, still uncertain, but less afraid. Spring arrived slowly in San Antonio. Marisol's jade plant had outgrown its original pot. She spent a Saturday afternoon repotting it with Leo's help. They made a mess of soil and laughter on the small patio outside her apartment. Ellen brought lemonade. Dad grilled carne asada. Everything was ordinary and precious. By April, Mari was leading her first solo project, a rezoning initiative that would protect a historic neighborhood from overdevelopment. It was the kind of work that made her feel rooted, both in herself and her city. She'd found her purpose and a way to serve without losing herself. On a Thursday night in May, the family gathered for dinner on the anniversary of her graduation. It was Leo's idea. "You never got a party," he said, "so we're doing it now." There were streamers, a cake with green frosting that said, "Still not living in the garage," laughter that didn't feel forced. Ellen brought a slideshow she'd made from photos over the years. The final slide was a picture of the jade plant in full bloom, captioned, "Nearly impossible to kill." Mari cried. Everyone did. Later that night, she sat on the steps outside her apartment, watching the stars wink above the backyard. Her mom joined her. "I was scared of losing you," Rosa admitted, "so I tried to make you small, and then I saw you become bigger anyway. Not in size, just in presence. You take up more space now, and it's beautiful." "I always needed to," Mari said. "I just didn't know how to ask." "Well," Rosa said, squeezing her hand, "we're better at hearing." Now, they sat in silence, the kind that feels like a conversation. When Amara visited in June, she was stunned. "This is a whole-ass apartment," she said, spinning in a slow circle. "You got a real bed, plants, a spice rack. Who are you?" "Someone who figured out how to live and stay," Mari said. "Do you regret not leaving?" "Not anymore." Amara nodded. "Still, you know you could." "I do. And that's the difference." By late summer, Leo had been accepted to UT Austin. He cried when he told Mari. "I want to go," he said, "but I'm scared of missing home." "You will," she said. "And it'll still be here. But now you know how to make home wherever you go." He hugged her, tight and silent, the kind of hug that says thank you without words. The night before he left, they sat on her apartment floor, drinking hot chocolate and talking about the future. She gave him a potted cutting of her jade plant. "It'll need light," she said. And patience. But it'll survive. Leo took it like it was gold. The house remained the same. But the people inside it had changed. They were a family now. Still messy, still learning, but stitched together not by obligation, but by intention. Marisol had carved out a place for herself, not in spite of her family, but alongside them. And the garage? It had never just been a place. It had been a beginning. Up next, we have 2 more incredible stories that are waiting for you. Just click the image you want to watch and it will take you there. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe. It would mean a lot.